Hi everyone, it's Darlene. Welcome back for another card video. For today's card, I'm using this die by My Favorite Thing. It's called a flop card. And so it creates this special fold where you open it up, it has that circle behind it, and the die does the cutting and the scoring for you. So here is the die. It comes with the two pieces, the circle and then the flop with the scoring. And then I'm also using this Mint Owl Studio set called Coffee Craze. So I'm going to start by stamping my Milkshake down on some Neenah Solar White cardstock with some Memento ink and also the sugar packet. And I'm going to go ahead and color this with some Copic markers. I'm using R85, it's kind of a darkish pink, and I'm flicking upward from the bottom, like from each side of the cup, with a flicking motion toward the center. And then I'm taking R83, it's a medium color. I'm doing the same exact thing. I'm starting at the bottom, except I'm extending a little bit more toward the center. I also added some of that R85 to the top and bottom of the cup. And then with my R81, I'm just going to kind of feather it in the middle there. So I'm covering most of the white, but I'm leaving a little bit. But I didn't want to cover over the R85 or the R83. So I'm really just focusing on the middle part with this color. Next, I'm going to take a W3. It's a warm gray color. And I'm going to flick from the sides again. And I'm just going to do a little bit on the edge here. And this is going to provide some shading. But it's a little bit different because it looks a little bit more realistic than if you were to add just an even darker pink. So it just sort of adds a little variation in color. And so I'm going to do that on both sides. I'm going to kind of whip through this next side here. And I'm also going to focus on hitting right underneath the lines of the cup because that's sort of where there are ridges, and also underneath the very top of the cup. I'm not worried about going outside the lines because I'm going to be cutting this out. All right, now I'm going to take W1 and the W3 that I just used and color the whipped cream. So I'm going to take the W3, which is the darker of the two, and I'm just going to go lightly around the edges and underneath each line of the whipped cream. So I don't want to cover the whole thing with color because it's supposed to be white whipped cream. So I'm just adding some shading here and there. Once I'm done with the W3, I'll take my W1 and I'm just going to go over the edge of the line I colored with the W3. So just adding a tiny bit more color, but just mostly going over the W3 and extending out just a little. And then I'll take my 0 and I'm going to do the same thing I did with the W1, except now I'm covering the W1 part halfway and pulling it out a little bit. And I'm also sort of going over the whole thing to mute it and blend everything together. For the straw, I'm just going to color every other stripe with an R27. And then for my sugar packet, it's going to be really simple, just two colors. I've got BG13. I'm just going to flick upward, just like I did with the Milkshake, being careful not to go past that sugar circle. And then I'll take the BG11 and just do the same exact thing and extend all the way up to the middle of the packet. Again, being careful not to go inside that sugar circle. For the sugar circle, I'm just going to take Y11. It's a really light yellow color, and I'm going to color the very, very edge, and then I'll take a 0 and blend that out and kind of push the color mostly to the edge of the circle because I just wanted it to be just a hint of yellow. And then I'll go ahead and cut out both of these with a scissor. I'm going to work on the card base. Now I have a piece of Fog cardstock by Simon Says Stamp. I'm going to mark the middle. It's just a standard piece of cardstock cut in half lengthwise. So I marked it at 5 1/2, and now I'm going to mark it in the other direction at 2 1/8 because that's 1/2 of 4 1/4. So that is the middle of my entire piece of cardstock. Now I'm going to take the curve, and there's a little center point right there. I'm going to line it up with the center point that I marked. And then I'm going to draw a line underneath the score area. And I want to make sure that my die is positioned perfectly straight across this cardstock. So to do that, I'm going to take my T-square and draw a line all the way across. And that will be my guide for the bottom part of my die. So I'm going to go back to my die and I'm going to line up that middle notch up there at the top. And then I'm also going to line up my bottom lines with the pencil line that I drew that was perfectly straight across. And this should center the die on the cardstock as well as make sure that it's completely straight. So I'm going to put some surgical tape, a couple of pieces here to make sure it doesn't move, and then I'll run it through the Big Shot. I'm going to carefully remove that surgical tape by staying really close to the cardstock. And then once I take the die off, you'll see that it cuts the circle, but it just scores the bottom part. just the bottom part around the circle, so not actually through the circle. And then I can fold it in my direction. And you can see as I flip this over that there's going to be some excess cardstock on one side, and I felt like this was the best way to maximize my scrap. So I cut it, and now you can see that it measures just under 5.5, so it will perfectly fit into an A2 size envelope. I took the circle that came with the set and cut out some Nina Silver white, and that'll fit right there in the middle of my circle. And I wanted a white strip with some stitching on it, so I took a piece of white cardstock and my rectangular stitch die, and I'm gonna go ahead and cut that out on one side so you can see I get stitching all along my piece of cardstock. And now I want it to be about 3/4 of an inch. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna measure 3/4 of an inch plus 1/8, which is about the distance between the cut line and the edge of the die that I can see. All right, so I'm gonna do that on one side, and then I'm gonna go down a little further and I'm gonna do it again so I have 2 lines to connect. And that way I can take my die and I can line it up right on those 2 pencil lines. I'll put a piece of tape right there to make sure it doesn't move, and I'll run it through the Big Shot. And when I'm done, you can see that I'm able to get stitching on the top and the bottom in a perfect 3/4 of an inch size. I wanted to add a little bit of a frame to this card, so I'm going to take my white gel pen and a ruler, and I'm just going to draw lines on all sides. I'm just being really slow and careful so that it doesn't skip or give me any of those double lines. I have a pack of Doodlebug twine, and it's got some pink that matches my Milkshake pretty well. So I'm going to put some ATG tape runner on the back of my white strip and just wrap a piece of this twine around it, and then I'll just cut off the excess with a scissor. Now to adhere this, I don't want to put tape, the Scotch foam tape, over the twine. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut a piece right up the middle with my scissor, and it's the perfect size to fit on both sides. So I'm going to put one piece on the top and one piece on the bottom. And then I'll take the release backing off and I'll position it kind of on the lower part of my card base. And now I'm going to put my sugar packet on there. So I'm just going to mark it with a pencil so I know where to put my adhesive, again, because I don't really want to add it on top of the twine. So I just cut a dimensional in half so that I got that adhered. And then I tied a bow out of that same twine. And to adhere my bow, I'm going to take a glue dot. This is a Stampin' Up! Mini glue dot. And I'm using my paper piercer to kind of roll it up into a ball. And then I put my glue dot wherever I want my bow to be. And then I can press my bow into the glue dot. And I know that it is not coming off at all. And then I can kind of maneuver it around to make it look perfect. And then I'll just cut off. I want this to be a really, really tiny bow. So I just made the loops really small, and now I'm cutting the tails to be really short. And that is it for the outside. So now on the inside, I'm going to put my white piece on with some tape runner. My Milkshake needs to be flat because part of it is on the inside of the card. So I just put some tape runner on it, and then I added some two-way glue to the straw to make sure that was securely onto my base. So I just kind of hid that a little bit inside the card. And now I'm going to ground my Milkshake. I'm using a W3 and W1. And I'm kind of random about how I draw it, but I try to draw the tabletop pretty level. Now the Copic markers on colored cardstock look really dark when you first put them on, but they really fade a lot. And it's going to look good. Right now it doesn't look very good, but over time it looks a lot better. I added my sentiment with the Misty to make sure I didn't mess anything up, and I just put some Memento Tuxedo Black ink on it since that was what was already on my craft table. And that is the card for today. So I really love the way this Milkshake turned out. I love those pink colors and the sugar on the front. So I hope you enjoyed that, and I will see you next time. Thanks for watching.